Gridlock, 70,000 new jobs, an epic political battle on the horizon, and World Cup soccer. Join us as we kick around these issues on Peninsula This Week's Monthly Roundtable. Stay with us. I'm Bob Marks.
And I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to Peninsula This Week. Today we have our usual roundtable, our monthly roundtable, joined by Richard L. Silver, president of the Rail PAC, which is the Rail Passengers Association, and veteran Peninsula political activist, and Peninsula Bureau Chief for the San Francisco Chronicle, Jeannie Cooper. Hi, welcome both of you.
Thank you.
I thought we'd start off by talking about transportation, since that seems to be the #1 thing on people's minds. Is there a short-term or a long-term solution to this problem? Is there a political consensus for that, both within the political structure and within the electorate itself? Rick, why don't you start?
Well, I think there's a potential to solve the problem, and I think we have the tools and the information to do it. But from my observation, and I think the observation of other rail and transportation activists, our political leaders are not bringing all that information together. I mean, recently we've had what seems to be the establishment of another organization to study and review the problem and come up with
the Economic Vitality Partnership.
Right. And, you know, their intentions are noble, and I wish them luck, and I hope I'm wrong in my analysis, but I think this is just another committee that's formed that we may all forget about in a few weeks or a few months. And to the extent that they do anything, it'll be another fanfare in the paper, and then it'll be forgotten. The time for study, research, committee forming, harumphing is over. It's time to do something, I think, positive. Winston Churchill.
I hate to think that the time for harumphing is over. Jeannie, you got any thoughts?
No, I totally agree with Rick. I think there's so many solutions that are available to us right now, and with just a little bit maybe of additional study, they could be implemented pretty quickly. We do have some great things coming on board. There'll be the light rail connection to Mountain View coming next year. We've got the BART extension to SFO, which will help people from Caltrain connect to a faster transit system into the city, and vice versa, which is very important. That'll be December 2001 is the target date for that. But there are other changes to, I think, our existing transit systems that could better reflect how people work and commute in this area. The Valley Transit Authority, I don't think, does a very good job of serving Silicon Valley workers and relies heavily on employers to supplement that with shuttles. That's not necessarily wrong, but I think they could expand their hours to reflect that people work later here. And maybe the traditional bus system is not as appropriate as smaller shuttles, because people, because of their changes in hours they work, don't work in these big 9-to-5 shifts that make these large diesel buses appropriate. Maybe we should be looking more at natural gas shuttle systems.
Absolutely.
It does seem like you see a lot of those expandable buses, the ones that look like an accordion, with 3 people on them.
You know, my concern is, and I brought this up before on this show, is that in 1987 we passed BART to the airport, and now we're 2002, maybe that's going to open. And it seems to me the problem is getting dramatically worse, and that if we don't begin seriously talking about the big solution, not tinkering around the edges, but the big solution, which is either extending BART around the bay or extending Caltrain and BART together, that it's going to get out of control 15 years from now, because it's going to take that long. Now, I mean, what do you think? I mean, am I overblowing the situation?
Not really, because the problem, to the extent that anything has been done to address the problem, and there have been things, the VTA extension to Mountain View is probably going to be the most significant transportation improvement done on the peninsula, from the Colma BART station opening to the airport station. I think that's going to generate a good 5,000 riders between the two systems, Caltrain and the other one. But, you know, where that might address the needs of 5,000 people, the time it took to do it, there were needs for 10,000 people created. So it's at best a stopgap situation that we're dealing with.
But it's not fair to expect government to be able to respond to these problems as rapidly as business is able to grow these problems.
I think they could respond much more fast than they are. And you know, we always say government should do this and business should do that, and that, you know, never the twain shall meet. Why can't we expect government to do the best, fastest, and proper job as we so often expect business to do it? I don't think that's unrealistic.
I don't know. You think about what's happened in San Mateo County. clearly the Silicon Valley Manufacturing Group anticipated what was going to happen to their community
Right.
before it became as severe a problem as it is now. And so they did things, and they have done things that at least tried to be
They've been very
affirmative.
good, yeah.
But that was because the problem arrived there a lot sooner. It's only really in the last 5 years, maybe 10, that in San Mateo County we've had this phenomenal job growth.
That's true.
And I don't think anybody anticipated that Silicon Valley was going to spill over and basically engulf San Mateo County the way it has.
But I think once you welcome in an Oracle into your midst and see the others start
Arts.
coming in as well, that it's incumbent on you to say, I wonder how those people
Yeah.
are going to get there. And maybe Redwood Shores isn't the best place for commercial development if there's only one entrance in or out, or if it's going to seriously impact the people on Highway 101.
Let me ask you, Jeannie, I mean, do you think we're looking at making a choice between BART and Caltrain, given the limited federal funds that are available, given the scope of those projects? Do you think we need to make a choice and choose either BART or Caltrain?
Well, to me, it just doesn't make sense to replicate BART on the exact path of Caltrain all the way down, say, to San Jose.
But should we have two systems then?
Well, I think we need two systems now because obviously Caltrain doesn't go into the city the same way that BART does. It serves, you've got that whole Pacifica, Daly City, Colma area where there has been growth in recent years that needs service too. People driving up from Half Moon Bay, which is now a new suburb, need a way to get in, and going across 92 to connect to Caltrain doesn't make sense. I do think with the electrification of Caltrain, we'll see much better service. I mean, that's still a long-term process, but right now people have time decisions to make. We were talking about this before the show, and I know that I can still drive to San Francisco faster than it takes me to get on Caltrain. Now, on a spare the air day, as we had recently, said, okay, well, I'll carpool with someone. Sometimes I do take the train and plan on a nice, good read, but it shouldn't be that way. It should be competitive with BART, both in, I think, in the time and the cost. And until it is, I don't see why we should be developing both of them equally.
Well, here's the problem. If you're San Mateo and you've got Fashion Island, or whatever it's called now, Bridgepoint, or Bridgepoint E, and you need to develop that because it's land it's available for development, and development is the only way you can improve your city's fiscal standing because you can't raise property taxes. Why should you consider the impact of that development on what happens to Belmont or San Carlos or somewhere down the road when down the road Redwood City's developing off of Woodside Road off of 84, and they're not worrying about what that's going to do to your community? Why should you care? Why should
Well, I
you
think that's
concern
exactly the
yourself?
problem, is that you should care, because ultimately the problems do spill over into each other in terms of congestion, in terms of pollution, just general quality of life issues. And I think that's what the Peninsula has sorely lacked for a long time, is that sense, hey, we are all in this together.
I think the public realizes that, though, better than the politicians. I've attended in 30 years 100 meetings of the Council of Cities and the Council of Mayors, and it's not unusual at a meeting for them or other forums to get somebody to get up and say, we all have to work together, we all have to work together, and everybody agrees and they pass a resolution to do it. But in San Mateo, we have 20 cities. Santa Clara probably has close to 20 cities. This looks roughly like Italy in the 17th century or something. Nobody wants to give
artwork.
without the culture, right? I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. But nobody's everybody agrees that there's a problem. No one is willing to give up one iota of their local control over.
The most interesting thing about that to me is that most people don't recognize any significant difference between Belmont and San Carlos, except the people who run those cities.
Or who live in them. Yeah, that's true.
Well, and to some degree, people who live in them. But by and large, the kind of people we're talking about who work at Oracle or Electronic Arts,
That's true.
to them, it's all one large amorphous
freeway
suburban
off-ramp,
sort of
right.
community, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, excuse me, I think what's important is the fact that with growth, have we gone too far? And are the incentives for the cities to continue to try to create commercial real estate or Home Depots or things like that as opposed to more housing? How do we fix that? Are we in a situation that's spiraling out of control? And do we need to begin to seriously address that and look at some kind of regional restraints or even a tax on development or something like
Well,
that?
I think to the extent that there's going to be any massive growth, and there's still some room in San Mateo County and certainly in Santa Clara County, it's going to tend to occur on the 101 corridor, and even to that extent on the east side of that corridor. Pretty much everything on the El Camino corridor, and certainly west of that corridor, is built up with houses. For better or for worse, that's pretty well done. I read someplace when I worked for the county that there were only enough spots in San Mateo County to build 15,000 new homes in the whole county. If every housing permit was issued, 15,000. That's only about 50,000 new residents in the county. So we're pretty well, and the biggest tract of homes was something like 175 homes that was approved a few years ago. So what's left is there on the east side of Bayshore. And almost all of those people that will work on those jobs will be people that will either come in from outside of the county, or people, when they get that job, will move into the county and buy a house, jacking up the prices because they have to buy it from somebody that's selling it, and they have to go off to someplace else. I think, unfortunately, maybe past the point of no return, that any solution to the problems of the job housing imbalance, the transportation network, the development issues, maybe past the point of really finding any effective solution. You almost need to do what Santa Clara County's done in the Morgan Hill-Gilroy area, recognize that there's a lot of open space down there, that it's probably going to be developed, and do a master plan.
There's no equivalent in Santa Clara County.
I'm sorry.
The only equivalent area is the coast side, and that's, I mean,
Or the Skyline.
There'd be a holy war if you tried to develop.
No, but I'm
the way
saying
they-
what we should have done is what they're doing.
But we're not going to do that.
No, because there's nothing left to do it except on the coast side, and it's not going to happen.
Jeannie, should we just say no more development? Should we put a moratorium on any development in this
Oh, I
county?
know a lot of people who would like to say that, but I think that's naive, and ultimately you have to ask questions, well, what will that do to our economic growth? We've enjoyed a lot of benefits, we have to realize that, from the development in the area, but there's no doubt about it that, you know, sensible planning helps, and I think we should point to some of the good things that have happened, developments in downtown Redwood City that combine residential and commercial development. The crossings in Mountain View, where the housing was built around a transit center. In fact, a new Caltrain station was opened there. So I think it's that type of smart development. When you were talking about the limited number of permits, that's of course under existing zoning. And while I wouldn't say let's pave over the coast side, we can also look at what's happened in San Francisco. There are light industrial areas in this area that are underused and could be rezoned and have the type of housing that would attract some of the younger workers that are coming in. I think you can look at some creative solutions. There have been conversions of, you know, what would we think formerly undesirable tracts of land into very nice housing stations. The old antenna farm down in Wisman Station in Mountain View being another one. And it's just a matter of being very creative. And I think we have people here who can do that. But we certainly don't have that option of just like, hey, that Coyote Valley, let's take that and put all our houses there.
The interesting thing is most of the sites you're talking about, as the development sites you've referred to, also tend to be very close to the main transit corridors. The only thing I'd object to is the idea of, you know, and this has been floated, of a tax or some sort of voluntary levy against business for developing. Really, that's what they should have been doing by having business involved in some of these regional planning decisions in the beginning. That doesn't mean they have to do a levy, but if business gets behind, say, a sales tax to improve an area or to develop an area as part of a master plan, then it's a lot easier for everybody else to find that as an acceptable option to raise their own taxes when they realize that the larger taxpayers are also are behind it and are willing to take their share of it.
I think you also made a good point when you mentioned that in general, people who are taking these jobs are coming in from out of the area. And this is, of course, a long-term problem, but we do need to look at training the people who are here to take those jobs, the people who grow up in the area. That's particularly true in Santa Clara County, but also I think as well in San Mateo County.
That's a good point. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back, and we're going to continue our conversation with Rick Silver and Jeannie Cooper. So stay with us, and we'll be right back.
When you go for your first job interview, chances are you're not going to be asked about the Treaty of Versailles or how to calculate the area of a parallelogram. But knowing these things can make you a big winner on Peninsula Quiz Kids. Hi, I'm Jeff Steinberg, and we're looking for the brightest students on the peninsula to compete against other area schools on Peninsula Quiz Kids. You can be a winner right here on Peninsula Television. Just give us a call and say, I want to be a Peninsula Quiz Kid.
Each week, we will be reporting from throughout the peninsula. Whether government, our schools, or local businesses, we'll be out talking to those making a difference in our communities.
You'll be meeting people working every day to improve your quality of life.
Watch for us. We may be in your neighborhood soon.
Join us on At Your Service.
On Peninsula TV, your community channel.
We're joined on Peninsula this week by Rick Silver and Jeannie Cooper, and we're talking about, well, we're having a roundtable discussion on some of the issues going on around there. The one that intrigues most of us political animals is the impending or looming contest between Ted Lempert and Byron Scher for the Mid-Peninsula's Maine Senate seat. The question is whether or not Ted Lempert, a Democrat, self-described protege of Byron Scher, is going to challenge Byron, who's running for a second term and will be termed out. Ted is termed out in the state assembly, so it's either up or out for him. What's your best guess as to what's going to happen, Rick?
Every indication is that we're going to have a Donnybrook next March. The two of them are going to be on the ballot, and it is going to be something comparable to the Lou Pappan, Quentin Kopp race of 12 years ago. The one thing...
Do you really think that they'll go after each other that hard? I mean, they are, at least politically, they've been friends for a long time.
You know, these things take on a life unto themselves when two people, as you said, I mean, this is the end of the line for whichever one loses, more or less. I guess Ted has some life after a defeat, but it's still a crucial election for both of them. And everybody, and this happens in the Republican Party, it happens with any other spectrum on the political, any other philosophy on the political spectrum. You just get into this no holds bar. It just ratchets down every day. I know both of them would start out. I know both of them personally. They're both good, decent people. But these things just ratchet down over the course of a 4 or 5 month campaign. Things happen. Their supporters do things that may not even be authorized by the candidates, and the candidates don't like. But then the other candidate sees it happens, assumes that the other candidate was responsible for it, and it just ratchets down. I know the Democratic Party, both on the state and local level, is doing everything they can to come to some kind of a resolution or solution to the problem. But I don't see any reason why this is not going to happen. There's no turning around for either of these two fellows.
Is the personal nature, I mean, wasn't Ted a student of Byron's at one point?
I think at law school.
Yeah, law school.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Although I've always wondered if he was making more out of that.
Yeah, but I mean...
one of those 450 student lectures.
I wonder where you have one of those long personal relationships and different kinds of dynamics to it, whether it can even get worse given that circumstance. In other words, where it even gets nastier when you've got that long personal relationship, or whether that'll hold it back a little bit.
I think this could and very well may get as nasty as anything else we've ever seen. Here's another,
which would be a shame from your point of view. I know how much you hate those.
Here's another thing to keep in mind, and we've all been involved to some degree in political campaigns. Ted and Byron are running for the Senate. Okay, they're not going to run the campaigns themselves. They're going to bring in some fairly sophisticated, experienced campaign people. We've all been there. We all know what happens. They say, you've got to do this, Senator. You've got to do this, Ted. You've got to hit him on this. And, you know, they're worn down. They've been going to coffee clatches. They're tired. They don't know. The campaign consultant fudges a little bit, doesn't tell his candidate all the truth. This is the real world of politics, folks.
I'm shocked to hear anything.
And next thing you know, somebody's being accused of having done some terrible thing 15 years ago that at best is just a tangential connection to the whole issue. And then the other guy does the same thing. It just circles down farther and farther down. We've all seen this happen, and to expect this not to happen on this occasion because they were good friends or one was a student of the other a long time ago, and that's the point. It was a long time ago. Maybe if they were friends today. But we've all seen people that worked together on boards of supervisors, for example, and ran against each other. And ugly, bitter, divisive. All it's going to do is help the Republican Party.
Isn't this almost inevitable anyway because they need to distinguish themselves or differentiate themselves in the mind of the voters? I think the average constituent is going to say they've had very similar agendas. So the campaign is probably the only arena in which they'll offer voters the way to tell them apart.
Yeah. Right. I don't know if that's the planned idea when the campaign starts out, but that's what it ends up being, yes.
Well, it's hard to imagine either one of them attacking the other as being soft on the environment.
That's
true.
exactly.
But I could see something like education being a wedge issue, and perhaps even something like like charter schools, maybe one of
Right.
them takes a position on
Yeah,
charter.
I don't know where they are on the death penalty. They may both be for, both against. But and I don't know, so don't
I think
quote me on-
Byron was against it,
Okay.
maybe at one point.
Okay, but let's assume for whichever one, I'm not going to say because I don't want it to be misconstrued, but one is on one side of that issue and the other one is on the other side of that issue. That will be a major issue that will be raised in the campaign.
But Jeannie, is it your sense of the voters in this area that that's an issue, that's a wedge issue for them? What is your sense of what people are likely to be thinking about in this kind of an election year?
Well, I think in this area, I mean, we tend to be focused on the not in my backyard issues. I mean, leaf blowers has been a big issue for, both of these politicians, could well play to the masses on that. I think they'll be much more concerned about those environmental issues. As what you noted, they both have a very strong record. I think things that affect quality of life in this area, Silicon Valley and the Peninsula are going to be uppermost. And I don't think really the big issues, abortion, death penalty, are going to come up unless that's
disagree.
the only thing that the
Disagree on.
yeah, and that their campaign managers decide to focus on because they're too similar in those other areas.
One of the other interesting dynamics that happens here is you've got a lot of supporters that have supported both of them and have to make a choice. And you end up with people choosing one side or the other, and then those people who've had long alliances really take it personally against each other. And so it can have an impact on the future political landscape. And we were talking before the show about how these occur every once in a while on the peninsula, these major races, and they tend to define to some degree the political future. New candidates crop up out of those groups, and there's polarized sides as a result of this where people previously had agreed.
Well, you mentioned about popping up. I had been involved for some time in the Democratic Party and stuff, and there was a kind of a brief flurry of an idea of a third candidate entering the race because these two would kill each other and it would be ugly. There's a concern that Caneen is going to benefit, who's a presumed Republican nominee, is going to benefit.
He's an assemblyman from Santa Clara County.
Right, the southern half of the Senate district. And that maybe there needs to be a third candidate. Well, these kind of things tend to come with, and if they're watching the show, I apologize, people that tend to be a little less sophisticated in the political process.
That's your third apology since we started.
I'll never be on the show again. Right? Keep Silver off that show.
But just stop apologizing.
But that's just not going to happen. These guys are not going to, and I don't expect them, and nor should they have to say, well, for the good of the party, I'm going to step back and let Sam Smith be the candidate. You make movies and write books about that. That doesn't happen in real life. But the fact that people are thinking about that, some people, as unsophisticated as I think they might be, leads you to believe that there is a real concern about Donnybrook that's going to occur and the benefit that's going to benefit to Caneen. I don't think Caneen ever had a chance of winning this seat. I still think whoever the Democratic nominee is, that he will be the next senator, but Caneen's only...
It is the kind of seat that tends to be up for grabs.
More than any other seat.
To me, the more interesting difference between the two, and it relates to some degree to what we were talking about in terms of regional leadership on issues that people are concerned about, like traffic, congestion, and growth, is that in the area, Ted has had a much higher profile than Byron. Byron has been very satisfied to be more in Sacramento and sort of doing his work.
Right.
Now, obviously, he'd object to some degree to that characterization.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
But Ted Lempert's the one who's been holding pancake breakfast, it seems like every other weekend in Palo Alto, and sitting out in the plaza off University Avenue,
His family
taking
lives
on
in the
all
district.
comers.
His wife and children, they're home every night. He's the one that goes to Sacramento.
And in fact, his family does not live in the district.
Byron, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing is you can't overlook the age difference. Byron is clearly at the end of his career. Ted is young, and the energy level, that could become the defining issue in the race, is people perceiving.
And Lempert will probably do that, at least quietly. I've never liked that kind of a thing. If somebody's healthy and vibrant, what's Scheer in his late 60s, you're healthy and vibrant.
He's in his 70s.
Okay, but the point, this guy doesn't look like he's in his 70s. He's healthy, he's active, he gets around. Everybody thought that Reagan might die in his first term. He's still alive 20 years later. That's not as healthy as everybody wants, but he's almost 90. Those things, I always think those are a cheap shot. You take a guy or a girl when they're running for office and you base them on their activities. But that's going to be an issue. That's going to be an issue.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the World Cup. which we saw recently, quite a reaction nationally in this country to the women's victory in the World Cup. Jeannie, first of all, what impact do you think that victory will have on women's sports? And is it in some ways a defining moment perhaps for women's sports?
Oh, I definitely think it is. I was at the semifinal game at Stanford, which had over 73,000 people, and like many other people, I watched the finals at the Rose Bowl. And I wouldn't call myself a soccer fan, but it was just so amazing. And I think anytime you reach that level of international play, you will capture people's attention. I mean, it's patriotism. We like to be number one. But the fact is, we saw really what dedicated athletes these women were, and how, you know, fully they gave themselves to the sport. And it's already having an impact on women's sports. My sister is head of the Houston Co-ed Soccer League, and she said calls of people wanting to play and find out more information just skyrocketed over the last 2 weeks. People who might not have been interested in sports before, men and women, you know, saw this. So it was good for soccer. It was good for women's sports. A lot of commentary has been about the you know, the preteen set. That was a big part of the audiences. But I think it extends to all ages of youth and both genders too, that it was just something to be excited about. Soccer is what our kids are playing. We may be watching baseball, basketball, and football, but that's what kids do in school now. And for those who've grown up in that system and also grown up with the benefits of Title IX, I think this was a culmination and also a new beginning.
What was the atmosphere like at Stanford, both inside and outside?
It was just electric. I was actually there the day before. We caught the tail end of the U.S. women's practice, and it was there were about, let's say, 3,000 groupies waiting after the rock show as each of the players, you know, came up the ramp, and there was cheering, and they were all very gracious, you know, signing autographs. And the Stanford people couldn't wait to push people out. I don't think they'd expected it. You know, they were trying to set up the stadium for the game. People didn't want to go. They just, you know, they loved these players. And then at the game itself, boy, it was a sardine can up there, scorching hot weather, and you know, no one left. I mean, they were riveted to their seats. And there's a good point someone made. Some people saw the picture of the U.S. flag being passed around the stadium. It was actually a joint Brazil-U.S. flag. So there was a camaraderie there too. There was no "kill the Brazilians" atmosphere. It was just, you know, go team. And I think that was also nice to see. There was no hooliganism or, you know, rowdyism or really, you know, unpleasant American jingoism. It was just, hey, we've got a great team and we're really excited.
One of the odd things about this, though, is, and I heard this on the radio the other day, that you know, they talked about how these are, you know, first real role models for women athletes, and I thought to myself, well, you know, we've had a lot of successful,
Chris Evert.
well, I mean, a lot of successful women athletes in the Olympics over the years, and I don't know why this particular group is catching on and creating a buzz that other athletes haven't created.
I think the word is group. It's a team effort, and women have excelled in sports, of course, for years. There's Babe Dietrichson, I mean, there's Wilma Rudolph, but they're all individuals.
Yeah,
and team sports are what in schools that, you know, girls are often the last to get picked to be on the team. There's not maybe enough girls just to have your own team within schools, so you have to go to interleague play. And there are very few team sports that are widely available to girls besides these days soccer and, you know, of course, Little League. But there's not a professional women's baseball league either. I mean, we saw some of this with the women's softball team at Atlanta, that got people excited. Again, it's that thought that women can be part of a team, and I thought the media focus on Mia Hamm early on was very misplaced, and she felt so too, and we saw that through her performance. It was part of a team effort, and it was really the team effort that I think, you know, molded itself.
I got hooked.
I've got to stop you there, Rick. And I want to thank you, Rick Silver and Jeannie Cooper. And I want to thank you at home. I'm Bob Marks.
And I'm Mark Simon. Join us next time on Peninsula This Week. Thank you for being with us.